So to get started for this one, I just have an icosphere that I subdivided in the center, pointed the camera at it. Then in the shading workspace, I have a 3D viewport, the node editor, and then I'm just going to drag this guy to the side so we can see more clearly. Then for the lighting and the render engine, I'm using Cycles. You can also use Eevee. And I'm using the scene world lighting that Blender has built in, the forced HDRI, and I just have it rotated at 45 degrees, but that doesn't really make much of a difference. Anyways, we'll press new here, and then I'm gonna type in Grape. And then to get started, I'll press Shift-A noise texture, or search for noise texture, just like that. Now we have this guy. Then if you don't already, go to Edit Preferences and check the Node Wrangler box in the add-on section, just right here. That way you'll have all access to all the shortcuts. Then with this selected, we can press Ctrl and T, which will give us our mapping and coordinates. So we Control Shift and left click this noise texture, we can preview it, and then we're going to take this object from the texture coordinate into our mapping. Sweet. Now on this noise texture, I'm going to switch the scale down to a 3, and the detail up to a 16, and the roughness up to a 0.65, just to give us some more variety here. And I'm going to bring the contrast in a little bit, because right now it's sort of blurry and it's not really popping very much. And what we're making right now is we're making the mask of where those water droplets and the moisture appears on the outside of the grapes when they're cold. Obviously you'll be able to adjust this manually and it won't be the same every time. But yeah, so on this from minimum value, we're going to take this up to a 0.45. Nice. And then it's from max to a 0.8. And what that's going to do is the from minimum, or the black in here, is going to be where the actual grape is, the grape color, and then the gray parts are where the colors are sort of mixing and the moisture is happening, and so that's where the white is as well. Then this to max, we don't want it to be pure moisture on anything, so we're going to make this a 0.5, just because it looks really weird when you have a pure white on the grape, and that doesn't really look very good. So anyways, this is going to be our factor, obviously, for a lot of things. So first I'll factor it into the bump, because the water droplets are technically slightly higher than the actual grape. So I'm going to take this results, plug in the height. I'm going to switch the strength all the way down to a 0.025. So it's very subtle and it's not going to make much of a difference. So if I preview this right now, it's currently all white. I'll make it a grape color, something like this. And then if it's a 0.025, we don't really see much of a difference. If we make it a 1, obviously we will see where it is, but all the way down at 0.025, you won't really see the bump happening much, like it should be, because water droplets on it aren't very noticeable in their height difference. But anyways, now to do the colors, and we're going to use this as a factor as well, but I'm also going to use another noise texture to mix the colors in a cool way. So we're going to hit Shift-A and search for noise texture here, plug our vector into this again, and then we're going to take the scale on this guy, the detail, and put it at a 4. And then we're going to leave everything else the same. So then I'm going to hit Shift-A and I'm going to search for a Mix RGB node. And this is where we're going to have our colors. So I'm going to have 2 of these. So I'm going to have this guy, and then I'll Shift-D, and I'll have this guy. This one up here is going to be like our purple grape, and this one's going to be our red grape. And then we're going to be able to control this with a factor, and we can also get green grapes out of this too. So anyways, I'm going to drag this factor into the Mix RGB factors, then Control Shift and left click this top guy. Then I'll give you some hex values for these colors. This top color 1 is going to be a 6F2DA8. Again, that is a 6F2DA8, just like that. Then this color 2 is going to be a 4F1A8C. Again, that is a 4F1A8C, just like that. Then if we Control Shift left click the bottom guy, this color 1 is going to be an 832C54. Again, that is an 832C54, just like that. Then this other one is going to be a 741B51. Again, that is a 741B51. Boom. So now we've got our colors. So now we can mix them together. So I'll hit Shift-A, get another Mix RGB. Oh, not a Mix shader. Actually, I'll just take this guy and then hit Shift-D and move him over here. Now I'm going to take the color from the purples into color 1, and the color from this guy into color 2. Now if we Control Shift and left click to preview, it's sort of mixing them, and that's kind of cool. We can obviously change this factor if we want it to be purpley, or we can go somewhere in between purples and the reds, just like this. So for now, I'll leave it on a 0, just so that it stays at a pure purple, so we can sort of see some cool effects happening here. So then after this guy, I'm going to hit Shift-A and search for a hue saturation node. And this allows us to get our greens if we want to. So we can just change the hue to like a 0.015. And then we have our green. We may want to decrease the saturation just slightly, maybe not all that, like to like a 0.7 or maybe a 0.8, and then boom, we have our green grape. Anyways, I'll switch it back to default values, which is a purple. So then after this, we're gonna mix in our sort of moisture. So I'll hit Shift A and search for another mix RGB. Plug this in here. This will be color 1, and then the factor is going to be this map range like this, so we can sort of see what's happening here. And I don't want this to be this color, I want it to be a different color, so I'm going to give you a hex value for that. And that's going to be a DCD2E3. Again, that is a DCD2E3. Sweet. So this is sort of like a very low saturated towards the purple, because as you can see, if I saturate this, it's going to be a grape color. So I did that just because we're not actually using subsurface scattering or anything, because that would make everything super laggy, or it'd take a lot more way longer to render and things like that if we factored those things like that in. But yeah, anyways, so that's cool. So then I'm just going to take this color, plug it into our principled shader, then I'll duplicate this hue saturation real quick. So select it, Shift D, and put it in between so we can change the colors as a whole now. So if I want to go back to our green, I can change this to 0.05. I'll preview the shader with the Control Shift left click, and then lower the saturation a couple times, and boom, we have our green grape here. So we can change the grape color, or we can change the fog color. Like we can even make the fog a red if we wanted to. I don't know why you necessarily want to do that with the grape, but you can. Anyways, so yeah, now for the roughness, that's pretty easy as well. We're just going to press Shift A. I'm going to search for an invert node. And then we're going to be plugging this map range into the invert node. So if we Control Shift and left click this invert node, it's currently looking like this. And in roughness data, white equals rougher and black equals less rough. So we're going to hit Shift A and search for a map range node, because this is obviously too rough. We'll plug it in afterwards, make sure we're previewing it. And then this from minimum value, I'm going to bring up to a 0.6 so we can bring up our darks. And then the minimum roughness, I want this to be as a 0.1. And the maximum roughness, I want this to be as a 0.3. So now we have our values here. So if I Control Shift and left click the shader again, I can plug our result into the roughness. And now we have our finished grape material. Something I wanted to point out real quick is if you get a smaller size grape and you've applied the rotation and scale and it's not showing up as it should, like on our main sphere, you can always go in here and you can hit the duplicate button on your material, which will give you an exact copy, and then go to your mapping node here, and then you can up the scale to something like a 20, and then boom, you have the moisture appearing properly. And this is because we're using object coordinates. So you can just up the scale, change the scale like this. You can up it even higher to like 100, and that just ups the scales of everything. But anyways, I just wanted to show you that, just so you know what's happening if it's not showing up on your smaller objects. But yeah, anyways, later.